Please, I never wanted you to find out like this.
Find out what?
The children, me.
What about them?
None of them are yours.
What?
Emeka isn't yours. Tolu isn't yours.
Stop.
And Remy isn't yours.
I flatlined twice on that operating table. The doctors told me afterwards. 2 separate moments where my heart stopped and the machine screamed and the room became controlled chaos around a body that had not yet decided whether it was staying or going. I did not know this while it was happening. I was somewhere else entirely, in the particular darkness that exists between living and not living, warm and weightless, and completely without thought. What brought me back both times, the doctors could not explain medically. What I know is that when I opened my eyes in that ICU room, and the ceiling came slowly into focus, and the sounds of the hospital assembled themselves back into meaning, the first face I saw was my wife's. Her name was Zainab. We had been married for 14 years, 3 children, Emeka, who was 12, Tolu, who was 9, and little Remy, who had just turned 6, and who had his mother's eyes and what I had always believed was my father's stubborn chin. Zainab was sitting beside the bed when I came back. Her face, when she saw my eyes open, was complicated. I did not have the language for it in that moment, lying there with tubes in my arms and a machine breathing alongside me. But I filed it away in the particular way that a man files things when he is too weak to examine them immediately. She held my hand. She said, "Thank God." She said the children had been asking about me every hour. She said everything was going to be all right. I squeezed her hand and closed my eyes and slept. I had been in the hospital for 11 days before it happened. A viral infection that had moved to my heart faster than anyone anticipated. Myocarditis, the doctors called it. Inflammation of the heart muscle. The kind of thing that presents as fatigue and chest discomfort and is easy to dismiss until it is suddenly not dismissible at all. I had been admitted on a Thursday evening, and by Friday morning I was in intensive care, and by Friday night I had flatlined the first time. By the time I was stable enough to be moved to a private room, I had lost 14 kilograms and the ability to walk more than 3 steps without assistance. I was 43 years old, and I felt 90. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. They used that phrase repeatedly, cautiously optimistic, which I came to understand meant they believed I would survive, but wanted room to be wrong. Zainab visited every day. She brought food I could not eat, and updates about the children, and the particular careful cheerfulness of someone performing normality for a person who is too unwell to challenge it. I watched her from the bed. I thought about the face she had made when I first opened my eyes, the complicated face, the one I had filed away. On the 11th day, she came in the evening after visiting hours had technically ended. The nurse on duty knew her by name by this point and let her through. She sat in the chair beside my bed, and she looked at me for a long time without speaking, and I looked back at her and waited. She said she needed to tell me something. Her voice was very quiet. The kind of quiet that is not calm, but is the thing that exists just before something large. I said, "Tell me." She said she had not told me before because she did not think I would survive. She said the doctors had told her on the second day that my chances were not good, and she had made a decision in that moment, that if I was going to die, she needed me to know the truth before I went, that she could not let me leave this world carrying a lie she had been carrying alone for 14 years. She said, "Emeka, Tolu, and Remy are not your children." The room was very quiet. The machines beside me continued their steady rhythm. Somewhere down the corridor, a door opened and closed. The light above the bed hummed its constant low hum. Everything continued exactly as it had been continuing a moment before she said those words. I looked at the ceiling. I did not speak for a long time. Not because I had nothing to say, but because every possible response that occurred to me required energy I was not certain I had. So I lay there And I looked at the ceiling, and I let the words settle into me the way cold water settles, slowly reaching everything. Then I turned my head and looked at her. I asked her one question. I asked her how long she had known. She said, always. She knew. From the beginning. She always knew. Stay right here, because what this man did next will leave you speechless. If you are new here, subscribe to Whispered Confessions right now and turn on your notifications. Every week, we bring you stories that hit this deep. Hit that button and let us finish this. The story came out over the following 40 minutes. There had been a man before me. His name was not important. Zainab used it once, and I did not retain it because it was not the detail that mattered. They had been together for 2 years before she and I met. The relationship had ended badly. He had left her, abruptly and without adequate explanation, for someone else. She had been devastated in the particular way of someone who was given everything to a relationship and received abandonment in return. She had met me 3 months after he left. She had been, she said, genuinely falling in love with me when she discovered she was pregnant. The pregnancy was his. The timing was unambiguous. She had known immediately. She had told him. He had told her it was not his problem. She had made a decision. She had told me the child was mine. We had been together long enough that the timeline was plausible if not examined too closely, and I had not examined it too closely because I had no reason to. I was in love with her. I was going to be a father. These were the facts as I understood them, and I had no apparatus for questioning them. The second child and the third child were different. Different father, not the first man. Someone else. A situation she described briefly and without detail. By the time Tolu was born, we had been married for 5 years, and the architecture of our life together was solid and established. And she said, convinced herself that the truth no longer mattered, that I was their father in every way that counted, that the biological detail was simply a detail. She had convinced herself of this for 9 more years, until the machine started screaming in the ICU and the doctors pulled her aside and told her to prepare herself. I lay in that bed and I listened to all of it. I did not interrupt. I let her speak until she had nothing left to say, and the room went quiet again. And all that remained was the hum of the machines and the sound of her crying. Then I pressed the call button for the nurse. When the nurse came, I asked her very politely to ask my wife to leave. Zainab stood up. She said my name. She reached for my hand. I moved my hand away, not with anger, with the deliberate precision of a man who needs to think and cannot think with her in the room. She left. I lay in the dark, and I thought about Emeka and his serious eyes, and the way he chewed his pencil when he was concentrating. I thought about Tolu and her laugh that started silent before it became loud, a laugh that had always made everyone around her start laughing before they knew why. I thought about Remy and his stubborn chin that I had attributed to my father, and which apparently belonged to someone I had never met. I thought about 14 years. I thought about every school run, and every hospital visit, and every nightmare at 3 in the morning, and every first day, and every last day, and every ordinary Tuesday that had accumulated into a life. Then I did something that surprised me. I called my brother Chidi. Chidi was 2 years older than me, and had been the most consistently sensible person in my life since childhood. I told him everything. All of it. He was quiet for a long time when I finished. Then he said, "What do you need from me right now?" I told him I needed a lawyer. Not tomorrow. Tonight. I spent the next 3 weeks in that hospital bed recovering. Physically, my body was doing what the doctors cautiously optimistically believed it would do. Stabilizing, strengthening, the slow return of capacity that follows a serious illness when the body decides it is staying after all. In parallel, quietly and with the specific focus of a man who has nothing to do but think and plan, I was doing something else. My lawyer's name was Mr. Okunko. He visited me twice in the hospital, both times outside visiting hours with the particular discretion of someone who understands that what we are discussing requires privacy. We talked about the marriage, we talked about assets, we talked about the house and the savings and the investments that Zainab and I had built together over 14 years, and what the law said about all of it. We talked about the children. This was the conversation I had dreaded most, and which turned out to be the one that clarified everything. Mr. Okinko asked me what I wanted with regard to the children. He framed it carefully, professionally, giving me every available option and their respective implications. I did not need the options. I told him that Emeka, Tolu, and Remy were my children, not biologically, but in every way that I understood fatherhood to mean, in the mornings and the evenings and the school runs and the nightmares and the ordinary Tuesdays, they were mine. That was not something Zainab's confession could remove. Biology is the beginning of parenthood, not the definition of it. I had defined it for 12 years with Emeka, 9 years with Tolu, 6 years with Remy. I was not walking away from them. What I was walking away from was the marriage. Mr. Okonkwo nodded and began writing. The divorce proceedings were handled with the precision and thoroughness that the situation required. Zainab contested several things. Mr. Okonkwo addressed every contestation with the calm efficiency of someone who has done this many times and knows exactly which arguments hold and which do not. The process took 7 months. At the end of 7 months, I had the house. I had joint custody of all 3 children with primary residence with me. I had a clean separation of every financial asset accumulated during the marriage, with a division that reflected the actual contributions made by each party over 14 years. Zainab moved into a flat on the other side of the city. The children split their time between us under the arrangement. Emeka, who was old enough to understand that something significant had happened without being old enough to understand all of its dimensions, asked me once if I was still his father. I sat him down. I looked at him directly the way I had always looked at him when I was telling him something important. I told him that nothing that had happened changed anything between us, that I had been his father from the first moment I held him and would be his father until I had no breath left to be anything at all. That fatherhood was not a biological transaction, but a daily choice, and I had made that choice every single day for 12 years and intended to keep making it. He hugged me for a long time without speaking. Tolu cried. She had her mother's instinct for emotion, and she cried the way she laughed, quietly at first, and then completely. I held her and said nothing, because sometimes nothing is the right thing to say. Remy, 6 years old and entirely himself, asked if we were still going to his football match on Saturday. I told him I would not miss it for anything in the world. I did not miss it. I am writing this from the house, my house. The same kitchen where I made breakfast for 3 children every morning for over a decade. Emeka is upstairs doing homework he will claim not to have when I check on him. Tolu is on the phone with her best friend having a conversation that will apparently never end. Remy is in the garden with the stubbornness and the chin that I now know belongs to a stranger, but which I have decided belongs to me. People ask me how I forgave. I tell them I have not decided whether forgiveness is the right word. What I have decided is that anger is too expensive to maintain when you have 3 children watching you model what a man does when he is hurt. I have decided that the best revenge on a situation that tried to break me is to be visibly, undeniably thriving. I flatlined twice. Both times something brought me back. I know now what it was. It was Saturday football matches. It was homework that does not exist. It was phone calls that never end. It was a stubborn chin and a 6-year-old face that I have decided, regardless of its origin, belongs to me. Some things are worth coming back for. These 3 are worth everything. He flatlined twice, heard the worst news of his life, and still chose those 3 children every single day. If this story moved you today, drop a comment below. Would you have done the same thing? Subscribe to Whispered Confessions right now, because we have something next week that will absolutely destroy you in the best way. Share this with someone today. I will see you then.